Right, so let's get it started. Welcome to We Are Movement. Tonight it's me, Emanuel, a founder of We Are Movement, and here we have
Magnus
Westerberg,
Yes.
part of the We Are Movement network, right?
For sure.
Exactly.
Delighted to be here.
Yeah. So the subject tonight is about the Scienceprints.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we formed it, or we stated that this is a way of moving from a hypothesis into sort of a customer validated solution in just a few days, right?
Exactly, and to do it really quickly.
Yeah,
and to have that validation, as your actually a way of moving forward.
Yeah, it's a concept that we've had a few cases together actually over
Absolutely.
the years. It's been fun. It's always an interesting thing to start because people are really not used to forming solutions that quick, right?
No.
We get into sort of a analysis bias, right?
Yes, and also we're quite accustomed to the way that stuff takes time, right? Before you can implement it.
Exactly.
And having this to implement prototypes instead of stuff that is actually done, just to get the learning points, to get the validation, is for some that is a new concept.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say that everybody that experienced it, they love it.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, I mean, this is a tool. We're struggling a lot with innovation in our organizations, right? So this is a tool for us to get into more of design thinking, more customer-focused workshops, right?
Yeah, people often ask, what's the difference between design thinking and design sprints? But there's actually none.
No, it's a tool.
Exactly.
Within design thinking.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
Cool.
design thinking implemented in a certain way.
Yeah.
And applied to a week of fun.
Yeah, a week of fun, right?
Yes.
So 1 week of fun.
Yeah, 1 week of fun.
Yeah. So do you want to go through a little bit on how we work with this and how it can look, basically? Yeah. Because I think we're going to get pretty hands-on
Yes.
for a while now, going through sort of based on our and Magnus experiences, how to actually run a design sprint, right? So we're going to get our hands a little bit dirty without doing anything, but talking about how to get our hands dirty.
Exactly.
Right.
And also what we're going to be focusing on is, of course, for those who have perhaps heard about design sprints and read about them in the kind of original format in the book. Yeah, the excellent book Sprint, which I recommend to everyone. But there's a difference here, and we're going to explore that difference because the original format is more or less a one-off. Yeah, which we're not talking about.
No, exactly. This is a repetitive tool that you can use in any kinds of levels for any kinds of problems in a customer-oriented organization.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right. Cool. That's a good promise, actually.
It is.
So, right. So we're going to go through this. Magnus is going to go through a little bit about how to the sort of the 5 days, basically. Yeah. Right. And then we'll be back for questions and discussions. And if you have questions during the introduction here, or the introduction to design sprints, just put them in the chat, and we'll get back to them after the sort of the introduction to how to work. Right?
Let's go through the format. Kind of how it works, and then have a discussion and questions.
Cool, right? All right. So I'm going to switch into some presentation mode here, hopefully.
Cool.
I know, if I can find the sort of mouse and stuff. Can you do that? No. Yeah, there we are. Great. And we're going to go to the
Excellent.
And it's probably going to work. There we go.
There we go. And we are live. Cool. So what we're talking about here is a bit like what the difference is between the original design sprint format and what we implement, usually at least, and in our experience in organizations, because design sprints are for those of you who know it, it's a format from Google Venture originally, and which they use for the companies that they had invested in, and they came up with this format, and it worked time and time again. So they wrote a book about it, So originally it was like a trial and error workshop format, and then they arrived at what is now the design sprint. And as Emanuel said, the key thing here is that it is actually on the Friday, you validate the solution with customers. That could be done in several different ways, of course, but just the fact that you not only have a solution in a week, but you actually have validation. So you have a kind of a decision format there for people outside of the group that did the design sprint as well. But the important difference here is that when Google did this, it was, startups, and they saw that it was important to have the key personnel into the design sprint. So for instance, the CEO, so someone who could make the decisions during the sprint on which idea to go with, for instance, to prototype. And that's not how we do it when we implement it in organization and we facilitate and work with it, because that would make it just a one-off that you could do really seldom. And we would like to use it repetitively, but also for not kind of box it into where in the organization it sits, but actually it's for everyone. And the only interesting factor here is that obviously you need to have a cross-functional team in many ways, and we'll talk more about that. And then one interesting fact here is that, the original format, the design sprint week, and the rule is that you don't have devices, not even laptops, when you work with this, except on the Thursday for the designers who actually produce the prototype. But that's interesting, I think, in itself, especially now when we're so used to working with our devices and stuff, because it creates such a focus. And that makes you think about how we work normally, that we, because basically a design sprint is you concentrate on a task, on solving a problem, instead of spreading it out in the calendar, right? Instead of having, defining the problem in one meeting in 1 week, and then wait another week or 2 weeks for the next, you know what I mean? You kind of drag it out through the calendar, and here we concentrate it. So that's really interesting and dynamic, I think, and interesting to think about for other stuff as well, not only design sprints. And of course, it's really important to have lots of snack breaks. So you should have one now, I think. Okay, Monday, first day in the design sprint. So it's a week, it's 5 days, and every day has a certain kind of agenda and a mission. And on the Monday, what we do is to unpack and map the problem. And by unpacking it, we mean kind of describe it in a way that everybody that participates can understand it, not only, as a defined problem, but as a business opportunity. In other words, in what way will the solution of this problem create a business opportunity? And during the Monday, it's okay to have guests from other parts of the business who can explain stuff. And it's very good if you can demo the problem, or even if, there might be seeds to solutions or solutions that people have already tried. And also bring in as much customer data as possible when describing the problem, and no personas, real behavior data. And then also talk about what are the metrics of success. In other words, how do we measure that the solution that we come up with actually is a good solution? So the validation has some kind of, way of measuring that. It's also important that when we do this unpacking, we do it together. Even though someone might have more knowledge about the problem, it's important that not one department or one kind of person dominates this unpacking, because everybody needs to really understand the problem for the rest of the sprint. And this is actually kind of interesting, because how in organization it's very common that people come in, make a presentation, or they deliver a brief, and then they go away, and then people are supposed to work with it. This is a different way of working, where you kind of really make sure that people feel that they own the problem. Important also to leave all the unpacking and mapping stuff up on the wall. So during the week, people can revisit whatever you presented, and they can, you know, oh, what was that again? And when we talk about mapping, we really mean mapping. So for instance, this is from the sprint book, that you show the actual steps that customers or users or whatever stakeholder we're talking about, which step are they taking and where do they fail? So it's a kind of map in, it could be a customer journey, a decision journey, something like that, but that you really map it out sequentially, because that is a really good way of not understanding the context of the problem, but also later on when you're talking about solutions, you know where the solution kind of, what kind of the solution has to dock into, which is really important, actually. And the next day, the Tuesday, is then for developing the ideas. And again, here is one of the most important tweaks on the original format. So in the original format, you have a lot of the idea is to have a body of people that can really make the hard decisions for the company. But so they have department heads and stuff like that, C-level persons. But we want to use the design sprint often, so we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to have cross-functional competences, and we're going to do the other thing where we make someone have a decisive vote later on, and that could be anyone. The group can just decide who will have that decisive vote in case we have, you know, even opinions on two different ways of going. Yeah. So on the Tuesday before lunch, you split up in 2-3 groups depending on how many are participating, and you wait with the detailed solutions. You stay on a conceptual level. So each group is tasked with developing 2-3 different concepts before lunch, and concepts, again, high level ideas for the solution, thematic thinking, stuff like that. And then after lunch, you do the switch. So if the team I was in have these 3 ideas, after lunch, we give them away to another team to detail them and continue developing them. This is a really good workshop technique for other formats as well, because it, you know, it stops the idea of owning the idea, owning the solution, and makes people more looking at the solutions for different angles and perspectives. Is much easier if you always kind of, okay, I now work on your idea, you work on my idea, etc. And a great hint here is to sketch out the ideas like storyboards. Again, the sequential approach to whatever the solution will be. Most of all, because I mean, 80% of design sprints are, or 85 are about digital products, right? Design sprints work for physical products as well, and there's many examples of that. But even then, the sequential approach is really good, because first the customer does this, or the user, and then they do this, and then she does that. Thinking like that and storyboarding it like that will make the solution much more successful. It's really okay to detail one of the concepts more than the others, because you may have a favorite or someone that you think is a better solution. That's totally okay. But in the afternoon, it's not okay just to have one concept as the answer to the solution, because in the afternoon, you want to have at least 4 in total from the group, the whole group. And the reason for this is the old rule that to have a great idea, you actually just need many ideas. And this is also one of the great things with the design sprint, that you're on the Tuesday, you're really focused on just producing a lot of ideas. You don't have to think about is this implementable or not? Just focusing on the solution. Because on the Wednesday, let's look, here's a good example of storyboarding ideas, by the way. So you can draw it really simplistic, but people are already seeing that, okay, now I understand, people will do it this way. This is the way we're gonna, the solution is a flow of behavior. So on Wednesday, it's time to choose from this idea. And it might seem like a big stretch of time from the whole 5 days that you just use one day for selecting the idea you want to go forward with. But actually, you might need that time, because when you're doing the selection, you might come up with the idea that actually let's combine idea number 1 and idea number 4 into a new idea, and then you have to sketch some more. So it's really good to have that time to do that. And also, as I said earlier, instead of having a CEO or someone, you know, that is deciding because of a position, it's much better to give someone a deciding vote in case there is two alternatives that are really popular. Usually, actually, that's seldom the case. Usually, there is a solution that someone will will pop out. And because we did the switching the day before, you don't have that as much, that, you know, the thing where people have their favorite that is actually their own solution. You kind of get away from that. And you start the day by, you know, you walk around in the wall, the room, look at the walls. Maybe also important to look back at the Monday mapping to see, let's see which of these ideas are actually matching the problem description, the unpacking and the mapping of the problem best, and discuss together. Sometimes you have people saying that, you know, you should do the voting individually with those kind of art gallery sticker things, or with dots with pencil. Well, it's much better to have a discussion, is our experience, because in the discussion you learn a lot through each other's comments and each other's perspectives. And and it's really good to, in this discussion, that you motivate your own selection. So if I like idea number 3 best and I want to select that, I put my vote on that, I have to motivate why. I have to tell the other participants why I think like that, instead of just putting a dot on it. And then we can discuss it together, because when we do, I might find that there are parts of the motivation that actually make me think that, hang on, I'm going to switch to idea number 4. And there is also the possibility that happened to Slack when they did a big onboarding design sprint, that you end up having 2 ideas, 2 potential solutions that are the group can choose. Both are equally good, we think. What to do? Well, there is one condition that when it's okay. If you can prototype both, if the scope of them are okay to prototype in one day, the Thursday, then it's okay to choose both, and that's what they did. So selection of again, you see another kind of storyboard and ideas. Really keep it simple when you're sketching the ideas, as you see here. It's not interesting to have good looking stuff here. That's for later, but to really explain to people how the solution is supposed to work. And here people have voted with dots anyway. They didn't hear me. So it's time for Thursday, which we call Little Saturday in Stockholm. Then we build the prototype. Well, what is a prototype then in the context of the design sprint? Well, usually it's something, interactive artifact that simulates the solution in a way that is good enough for customers to be able to give useful feedback. In other words, it does not have to be one-to-one with what you're thinking that this will look like when you actually deploy it later on. And it doesn't have to be as good looking as your the site you're having or whatever. Some people are working a lot to make the prototypes look like finished products, but that's not actually. Customers and users are really understanding in terms of this part doesn't work, but it's supposed to work like this when in the end product. It's not what we're testing right now. We're testing this bit. People really understand that in testing situation with no problem. And also you can, there's these different theories and buzzwords around prototyping, and it's not so interesting actually, because as I said earlier, the only thing we need here is the ability to validate the solution with the customer. So we only need that part actually, and to be able to test if this works or not in the way we intended. And then it's not everything around that we can skip. So it doesn't have to be one-to-one at all. What's interesting though, and that's what I've been nagging you on, the sequential bit, is that customers need to understand how to move in the flow, because almost, as we know, almost every digital product is a kind of flow. So even though stuff are rudimentary in the way they look and feel, the different steps and the flow need to be in place. So focus on that rather than on pixel perfect stuff. Obviously, prototypes can be physical as well, and you can prototype physical products. And many people have done that, like robot grass mowers and stuff like that, and to see how, but then, they only prototype bits of it. For instance, the way the customer is supposed to interface physically with a lawnmower if they need to. And they just give people a mock-up of that interface, obviously. And as many of you know, today we have excellent tools like Adobe XD and Figma, where you can very easily build interactive prototypes, and which are often used for, of course, real production. So that's a problem, of course, as well, because it's easy to fall into trying to make it look nice. But the best thing with XD and Figma is that you don't have to code to make stuff interactive. So you can really test these flows and how people will react to them in a really good way. Here on the Thursday, it will be really evident that you needed to do this, think about the participants before you start, when you invited people to the sprint, because you need designers, you need great UX and designers to build a prototype, especially since you only have a day. So it's really important to have the right people in the group so you can to produce a prototype. And that's a good thing for, outside of the design sprint as well, obviously, because we want to have, we want to work cross-functionally, but especially here, you really want to be able to put the design into place in order to test it. Aim for a rough skeleton by lunch of the prototype, and use the afternoon to do the finishing touches. And then if the other days were a bit long, on the Thursday, it's important to at least try to time box it. So you're like, you're done at 4 o'clock, because it's good to have the last hour to for the group to test the prototype. So, and to make sure that it works in order to come into the Friday. Well, here's just a screenshot of Figma in action. I guess most of you people have already been into these kind of tools, but it's the good thing here, and we might come back to that later after we've gone through all the days, but if you do have a great design system, if you have given yourself the capabilities of prototyping easily, this is one of the ways that it kind of really shines, because when you do the design sprint, you don't have to do as much groundwork, because you can just put in your objects from your design library and then just add the new stuff which you have produced during the sprint. Okay, so it's time for Friday, finally, tomorrow. Well, I guess most of you know that you only need 6 to 8 people, 6 to 8 if they are well recruited, if they really represent the target audience that you're aiming for. If you have 6 to 8 people and sit down with them for 40 minutes, you'll get 80% of the answers that you would have gotten if you asked 200 people. And that's the research behind scenario-based user testing. In recent years, we've had such focus on the quant data and big data, and I mean, for good reasons, obviously. And I mean, traffic testing is actually could be the next step, or depending on your organization, you could even traffic test a Scienceprint thing, depending what you've done. But it's interesting. I mean, just meeting 6 to 8 people during one day gives you so much feedback, so much valuable feedback, which is, you know, I mean, that's really quick, isn't it? And it's, to me, always fascinating that most organizations do these, whatever you call them, user labs, Starbucks test, whatever you call them, they do them not often enough because you get so much valuable feedback, right? And you know, you're running the sprint, you're inviting people to participate in the sprint, so you know about the sprint in advance. In other words, you can also recruit people to test on in advance, and that's what you should do, because that is something that takes time sometimes, depending on if you have a really special target audience. Also, in these days, what's interesting is, of course, that since most prototypes are interactive, you can also test it remotely, of course. We could test the prototype now if we wanted. And that works better than you might expect, actually, because you're doing these things one-on-one anyway. And now when people are more and more used to working in Teams or Zoom or whatever, it works really well. Another thing, of course, is the opposite when we are allowed and when the conditions are right. Just bringing an iPad or laptop into the store or coffee shop, and you know, that could solve also the recruitment problem if you have a service or product that is general enough, aka for the general public. You can just test it in the store or a coffee shop and give people free coffee for testing your prototype. So the interesting part here is, of course, that we've done all this in just a week. You can start thinking about test scenarios even when you have, you know, in parallel of making the prototype, because on the Thursday morning, you know what you're going to prototype. And the important thing here is to try to think in a way of scenarios. In other words, here's a task that the customer is supposed to solve, and then think aloud while showing me how she or he is solving it. And then ask them a lot during that time, when they don't say things that, oh, okay, why did you do that? What did you think will happen if you click here, etc. And also when they've done stuff, you ask them if there were other alternative ways they would have liked to do it, if there was something they had a problem with, etc., etc. And of course, here we go back to the Monday and the definition of the problem. You try, of course, to mirror the test scenario with what you defined as your metrics for success. So completing the scenario, completing the task is equal to the metrics of success. So when implementing design sprints in this way, the most important difference is from the original format is the participants. And as Emanuel said already in the beginning, to do it often rather than one-offs. And I guess that's the most common problem with design sprints, even though you don't have CEOs or other C-level participants, that the organization, they don't do them often enough, because in a way it feels as if it disrupts normal work, because it takes a big chunk out of the calendar, and you're basically isolated or blocked during that week. On the other hand, as we already discussed, you are producing so much value in that short amount of time compared to how it usually is. So that would not be the way of thinking about it. Of course, especially when you're getting used to doing design sprints, and if you are bringing in more and more capabilities of prototyping fast with design systems, etc., then you can actually do shorter formats. You can think about a 3-day format when you have the first day for unpacking the problem before lunch, creating ideas in the afternoon. The next day you choose a solution before lunch, and then you prototype after lunch, and then the next day you test. And we've actually done that, and that works really well, especially if for groups and for problems where you have maybe you have similar problems coming up, you have like a development of a product that is ongoing, so everybody knows about a lot of the stuff and a lot of the problems. They're not new to them, and then you can shorten the design sprint like that. It's still important though to still keep the focusing part, because that is what makes the design sprint a bit magical. And then one thing that is super important is that, and where some organizations also kind of do not continue with the design sprints, is that the people that participated in the sprint, they keep the learnings to themselves instead of presenting. So for us, it's a perfect, what would you call it? It's the perfect town meeting or town hall meeting where you tell your colleagues about the sprint. We had this sprint. You even tell them about the alternative ideas you had, and then tell them about the test results, because that's a really good way of getting people into the mind of thinking about hypothesis and validation, instead of thinking, I mean, I know that we've used the word solution here, but that is not in, we're not used it as the, a defined, very definition of a solution, but actually something that we create and then validate. So that's really important, and also to increase the learning value of the design sprint as it has been done, but also increasing the learning coefficient in the organization, of course. That's really important, and that's why we do them, to get that customer feedback. Let's open up for questions, Emanuel.
Sure. So thanks, Magnus. That was super interesting. I actually have a couple of discussion points, but first over to you guys. I mean, feel free to unmute yourself if you have any comments and sharings about doing design sprints, if you see anything similar in your organizations, or have any specific questions regarding sort of what we've walked through now during the last 30 minutes or so. Anybody has anything? Otherwise, I have things. Yeah, so we have Jenny here starting with what's the biggest challenge? I think that's sort of a question that I also want to bring up. So when doing it, first of all, I'm going to start with the challenge of getting started. You were starting to talk about this a little bit. How do you actually get acceptance for doing this in an organization? Because of time, basically, right? So this team is basically gone for a week or so. Yeah. How do you do that?
Well, mostly it's about having, it's a kind of backward way in a way. having a problem that is big enough to motivate, and to also to have the kind of opposite effect that people think that, what, you're going to solve that in 1 week?
Yeah, all right.
So that people think that the idea of doing it this way has a kind of surprising value. So they think actually the opposite of they think, oh, they're going to be away for a week. They think, what, you're going to do that in a week?
Yeah.
And which is actually quite normal reaction as well, because what you can do in a design sprint week is often more than an organization gets done in 2 months.
Yep. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
if we're being honest,
yeah.
So actually it has, and that's the way I think also to motivate it internally and to explain the design sprint.
Yeah.
And actually also to show people if you need to do that, that the actual calendar time usually is stretched out. You do the same stuff but stretched out, and you don't get the same focus.
All right. So if you want to do it, if you want to act upon your will to innovate, you tend to do it for a month instead of just focusing on for a week, and
exactly.
then you spend actually more time, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All
right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
And you spend more time, but you are done later.
Right. So that's a challenge. What about within? I mean, to follow up on Jenny's question here as well. What about within, when you're doing this, when you're actually in sort of the design sprint workshops? What would be the biggest pitfalls in while doing it?
Well, one of the, I think, when you're starting to do it, it can be important to have someone facilitating the design sprint in a way that, so people, because one of the challenges is of course the way the group dynamic, and to make people comfortable.
All right.
Because people don't, unfortunately, people are not trained to see themselves as creative as they are.
Oh, right. Okay.
And what the magic thing with the design sprint is that you unleash this creativity.
Yeah.
And that's another way why it's so kind of effective and in what it produces. But in the beginning of the design sprint, and if people are new to it, it's really important to create this. What would you call it? Safety, or so people really feel safe to have. Not the classic thing with brainstorms. Every idea is a good idea. People don't buy into that.
It's not true.
It's not true.
No.
And people don't buy into that. But the thing that people are, and sometimes, which is also sad in many organizations, that you don't have that culture that you build on each other's.
No.
You come with one thing, I come with another, and that creates a third. And that kind of bouncing of ideas is what we want to do. And one of the great things with the design sprint is that until on the Monday, you have slightly certain special functions. So someone is presenting the problem. Maybe she or he knows more about the problem than you and I.
Yeah.
That's why they present the problem. And on the Thursday, some people are specialists because they are designers and can do the kind of actual production of the prototype.
Yeah.
But actually, except for that, during the design sprint, we're all equals. We're all equal creatives, regardless of our roles.
Yeah.
And that is in the beginning of the sprint. That's a challenge to get into that.
Yeah.
And then when you're into it, it's one of the values.
All right. Cool. Would you do? I often open up with actually failing together. Is that something that you've tried also?
Absolutely.
Where we do, it's like, let's bring up our worst ideas, for example.
Absolutely.
Just to get this psychological safety and the connections in the team.
Yeah.
Starting. And
having fun. What would be the absolutely worst solution for this?
Yeah. Spend a half an hour on that.
Yeah. Get it out of the table. And there's a version of that, and which we, in Sweden at least, call for solution 1A,
right?
Which is the most obvious solution. That if you have an unfacilitated, non-structured workshop, that are the solutions that the people with the loudest voice will shout out and claim is the best solution.
Right.
Instead of having such a session, everybody just take out their 1A ideas. and you're done with it, and you can go on further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because one of the things as well, I would say, is also the challenge of actually deciding on who to invite. Because what we're talking about here, for me, design sprints is such an amazing tool for getting the information that you need in order to actually prioritize your features, for example, as a product manager, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do is we want to create a cross-functional environment, right?
Yes.
You had I mean, I love the thing when I experienced that with you, actually, I think back in 2012. The first time, this switching thing, which is an amazing thing in problem solving. We do that also in when we do retrospectives or inspects and adapts, that we actually switch and we have a problem, right? But this is actually designing products and switching, right? So I love that part. But how do you decide who is going to be part of the design sprint workshop team, and how do you bring together several teams, for example?
Well, first of all, you basically, most of the times, the problem that you're trying to solve decides in itself a lot of the time who to invite.
So it creates a pull on the organization.
Exactly. Right? Yes. Okay. Yes. And whoever works in that value stream, etc., etc. But then also, what is good is to do the well, maybe not call it switching in that case, but call it mixing. So you actually mix and match on purpose, kind of the wrong people.
The wrong people.
Yes, the wrong people. So and okay. Which is also, you know, in the design sprint, since we're all creatives in the design sprint, it's not interesting when coming up with the ideas who is a designer, who is a product owner, etc. Right. So in that case, you also make sure that you mix people when they in the mini groups within the design sprint, but as well as the whole. Everybody that participates. But it's really important, that thing, that you maybe, if you see that you're creating a group that is too similar, too homogeneous, try to see who could be the odd one out.
Yeah, right. So diversity
is really, really important, and because otherwise, well, obviously it creates better ideas in itself, but it creates, in the beginning of the sprint, it creates a sort of friction, which is good.
Friction is good.
Yeah, friction is good.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we don't agree, that's when we come up with the best ideas.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And that's the great thing with the design sprint, because people can then learn how to. It's, you know, how it's not dangerous to have different opinions, and how to really work forward to something that they do together, even though they have different opinions. Right.
Cool. So, and also John, you had that question about the experiences from expanding from a design sprint to multiple teams, sort of, right? And that's what we touched upon a little bit.
Yeah.
I also want to stretch out. I mean, I also want to point out that it's sometimes hard to get access to people, right? And that's the idea with, you know, we are movement. We're doing a lot of safe stuff, right? And safe is kind of, Scale Agile framework is kind of the most popular way of being inspired how to work in large organizations. And that's also, I think that what I found is that during the sort of the break from the backlog, right, that we have in the innovation sprint that we have, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's a week where you can actually fit in.
Yes.
Bringing in people from different product areas, bringing in people from marketing and whatnot, right?
Yeah, and what we've done is that we have sometimes brought several teams that work together daily into a big design sprint with 30, 40 people.
Right, cool.
And then remixing them during the whichever way they like themselves. For the durational design sprint. But then, very importantly, doing the switching of the ideas. Because then that fosters a really great connection later on. Exactly. When design sprints, when you work normally, because you have then, well, you and I have worked together in the design sprint, but also maybe I inherited your great idea and developed it further, or vice versa. And maybe we don't get to do that during our usual work weeks
No,
because
exactly.
we're in different teams.
I mean, that's a way also of avoiding the we're heavily biased, right?
Yes.
So we go in, and I always have the best idea, of course.
Always.
Yeah, you too. Right?
That's no, you have the best
idea.
idea.
Okay, yeah. So avoiding that bias is also, you kill your darlings and whatnot.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And being challenged by new perspectives, because what can happen if you, I mean, it happens all the time. You work in your usual team, and you get settled into a kind of way of thinking and perspectives, and you get your safety zones and whatever.
Exactly.
Well, I will always talk about Emanuel about this because I know he will agree with me.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Cool.
So bad example though.
Yeah. Inga also had this question about what happens after day 5, because I mean
good question.
Yeah, I know. Because we are sort of proposing here that we should, every organization should do this on a recurring basis to actually get really customer focused, right, and getting the data in there, right?
Yeah.
So what happens after day 5, basically?
Well, some organizations are obviously using the Scienceprints instead of business cases.
All right, cool. See?
So, and then you know what happens after day 5. So the validation becomes the report, the decision material for whoever decides on moving forward on a higher level.
Yeah.
So that's one way of thinking about it. Another way of thinking about it is, as you said, if you have this, if you have stuff that are in discovery, and you can use that, use the design sprint for that, for features. And then you just, from the design sprint, you put them into the backlog or into the next sprint or whatever. Yeah. But the difference here is that you already know that they are customer validated.
Yeah, exactly.
Which actually brings, I don't know why, but regardless of story points and whatever estimation, people are much more productive working on stuff that they know that the customer already will like.
Yeah.
Or probably like.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's a really cool way of using it as well, as a kind of way of validating the backlog.
Yeah, exactly.
So to say.
I agree. I mean, and there's also another way of looking at it is also using this as a tool in for your big hairy problems. Like if you're working on a portfolio level, for example, with a big portfolio, you have your initiatives or whatever you call it, business epics and whatnot. And during the exploration, this is a way, just as you mentioned, to actually get into what kind of hypothesis is the right hypothesis to continue working on. So you get, because we want to be more data driven, probably, as you mentioned as well, when we're doing large things for in the public sector or our large organizations, we want to get more data in there, because I mean, if we're using a data sprint to get to diverge and converge on a really big thing, how to know, this is a tool for me actually to also select the right hypothesis to then validate with real MVPs.
Exactly.
And stuff
Yeah.
within, so we can actually get that data in there. I think that is also, it's a format that gathers a lot of people from the organization, and I see a lot of challenges there with epic owners and product managers. They're not really getting the attention that they deserve, because we're actually deciding really big things, right?
Exactly.
So I think what's important as well is to bring this from a team level to a large thing, right?
Yeah, and then also you have, if you go really forward and you're talking about DevOps and when you have the capability of deploying prototype-ish level stuff for parts of your audience.
Yeah.
And so you get into a way of doing this really regularly and as a part of your usual work. That's really valuable, and it, because it changes your way of thinking about how to not only prioritize features, but to how to invent them, as you say.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a innovation cycle, right?
Yes,
but shorter.
But shorter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is good. That's really good. So, do you trade good idea for one less good that will have less complex implications, perhaps. Sasha, could you expand on that, please? While we are talking a little bit about also now when we moved into, I mean, we are still doing things in rooms here and doing having in-room trainings and workshops and whatnot. But most of us are actually forced to work in a distributed way.
Yes.
And I know both you and I, we come from organizations where we have been working distributed. So we have a lot of actually experience, and you as well, right? So how do you do design sprints in a distributed environment when we're only doing it online?
Well, it actually, you can think, I mean, maybe it's Unsplash's fault, because all the pictures of workshops these days, and every stock image of a workshop is people sitting around the same table, lots of sketching being done, etc., etc. But obviously, if you have this kind of, if you have tools like Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, and you have facilitator that drives the sprint and helps people in terms of what they're doing, you can easily, the important thing is just to do the mini groups, so people feel, so they not work one alone. But they work two, 3, and 3, etc.
So the pairing thing is,
the pairing thing, you do that a bit more in remote design sprints than you do in physical ones, where you do the more common thing of, you know, breaking up, then coming back together, breaking up, coming back together. But if you do it remotely, you make sure that people are almost never alone, that they have a live ongoing conversation with someone, because that kind of sparks the brain a lot, and is kind of a simulation of being in the same room.
So
otherwise, apart from that, it's, I mean, it's the only thing that takes a little bit more time is the prototyping, because you're not sitting there together, and you kind of have a couple of, you know, sending stuff around instead. But if you just make time for that.
So it doesn't really boil, what you're saying here, what I hear you saying here is that it doesn't really boil down to the actual sort of tools and programs. It boils down to a better cooperation and pairing, rather than actually selecting the right tool. Wow. That's nice. I think that
you don't need any tool.
No, basically. So you don't need any tool. You can actually sketch and then take a photo. And
sure. Cool. And that's what I think. I mean, the one thing that is not the one thing, but an important thing from the original format is the ban on devices. And
what does that mean?
Well, when you work remotely, you can't do that, obviously. but when you sit together, you know how people have laptops in front of them in meetings?
Like the shield.
Like a shield, and it becomes something in between us. And I'm not sure if you're actually listening or and typing what I'm saying. But we don't know. So that's a really important dynamic of the design sprint, to work with pen and paper instead,
and still do that while being distributed.
Exactly.
I love that.
And so do it with pen and paper, and as you said, take pictures instead and send them, Slack them, or share them in your teams or whatever.
I think that's lovely, because I think that a lot of us are I see a lot of organizations that are sort of, they see the lack of tooling as their greatest impediment, and I can respect that, because we all want good things, and I want the newest, hottest thing, and I want to use whatever you were using in the you were mentioning a lot of tools in the presentation, right? So I want to have that, but if I can't, because I mean, you know, there's somebody else deciding about the budget and whatnot.
Exactly.
People are like, okay, so we can't do this because we don't have the tool, right? But what they can do is use, I don't know, Google Sheets or Google whatever.
Google Slides.
Google Slides, exactly.
Miro or something. You can sketch together in many different tools.
Or
this, and show it to each other. And there's actually something that's really interesting about how as soon as we start to use digital tools, we're producing an artifact. As opposed to when we're using pen and paper, is still an idea. And I think that's kind of ingrained in terms of, as you say, because when we go to the computer, we're using a tool.
Yeah.
So it becomes more real, and then it becomes more serious, and then it becomes more, ooh, is this the right thing?
Yeah.
And it's much better to stay on pen and paper up till the Thursday.
All right. Okay.
When you do the prototype.
Cool. So bringing in the customer then, I mean, now when we're distributed, it might be harder a little bit, right?
It might be harder.
Might be a little bit harder.
The recruitment could be harder.
Yeah.
But then the testing is not harder.
All right. Because?
Well, everybody's more used to sitting in Teams meetings and
yeah, right.
So it's actually and there, you also, if you manage to recruit them, you have they have time.
Yeah.
Because they're sitting there at the kitchen.
People have time.
Yeah, right. And they think it's a nice break.
Okay.
From the normal Teams meeting. So, I can sit and click on a prototype for an hour. Nice. And talk to someone. Nice.
Exactly. I also think that one thing that you brought up, I think it's really important to stress this, that we have quite good research showing us, for example, in the book, The Voice of the Customer, where we actually see that about 12 people, they generate the same security of the data, the qualitative data, not the quantitative, of course, in how to, if we like something or if we don't like it. It's like they have a 70% level of actually, they represent 70% of the potential market. And if we then move up to having 30 customers looking at and trying to validate our hypothesis, they move up to 90% of the market. So we need to get into 100% thing. We need a lot of people, but we don't need more than 6, 8, or maybe 12 to actually know that we're on the right track, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also what I think is really interesting is that what happens when you do this kind of testing with people is that you get to know the stuff that they're not testing for.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And that is so undervalued and sometimes has huge impact. We had a project where something we had no clue. The people were supposed to buy a premium product. There were different kinds of levels here, but the people that were supposed to pay more trusted the images less.
Right. Okay.
And this firm had a huge photo budget.
Yeah.
But they said, well, that product doesn't exist. That's Photoshop.
They don't trust the pictures, right? They want to have a description. For example.
It was too slick.
Right.
It was too nice.
Right.
It was too good. It was too good to be true.
Okay.
And nobody within the organization would ever have, even come up with the idea to test for that.
No.
Because they were, of course, working in the opposite direction of making it better and better and better and better looking.
Yeah, right.
Had we not had the test, which was for something else within that customer experience, we would never have known this about the imagery.
Yeah. Customers tell us surprising things.
Yes,
sometimes.
absolutely,
yeah,
surprising.
Right. Yeah. So, and you were talking now about you were sort of touching on the subject of if this is solution development, product development, or whatnot. But what we say is that we can use this in every part of an organization, right?
Sure.
This is a good way of bringing up, deciding on what kind of marketing we should do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very good for marketing.
Yeah.
And actually, you would love to see more kind of communication and marketing being produced by this kind of format, because it would be you have a faster way of producing better results.
Yeah, right.
And you validate them.
Cool.
As well.
But we do need to. I mean, one thing I was thinking about as well when you're presenting it, because you're making it sound very easy, right?
It is easy.
Yeah, right. But don't you have to know a lot of things? I mean, don't you have to have a toolbox of ways of doing this during the Wednesday, Thursday? How do you do this? Don't you have to know these things?
No.
Like how to sketch and do empathy mapping and whatnot? No. All right.
So there's in workshops and also in design, even in the book, there is kind of a which I think is misplaced focused on tools like this. Oh, now you should spend half an hour doing the crazy eights.
No.
You take an A4 paper, you fold it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then no, you don't have to do that.
No.
Maybe it's better to spend that time in actually, continuously developing your idea without having strange exercises.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of too much focus on kind of tools and formats in that sense. And because the time is short anyway in the design sprint.
Yeah.
So it's much more important to create that atmosphere that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And actually what comes up when you do that is that people also have suggestions for their own ways of doing it.
All right.
Their own crazy eights.
Okay.
And if they do, fine, let's roll.
But if you want to get better at facilitating, I mean, what would be like your top 2 advices for getting better at facilitating design sprints?
Well, the first thing is to really narrow down the problem definition.
Yeah. All right.
And to really limit the not the scope in the sense that we normally use the word, but the scope of the the kind of universe, the solution problem thing that we are doing. Make it more specific.
Yeah.
This calendar selection doesn't work. People are having trouble selecting the dates.
Yeah.
What should we do?
So stating and restating the problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So it's really a narrow focused problem is important.
So that's what you want to get better at that as a facilitator.
Yes.
And the next thing would be
the opposite. Opening up.
Okay.
Opening up and
diverging into the open
exactly
space.
And letting people having crazy ideas.
Yeah.
Let's select dates by throwing darts.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay.
And because sometimes you cannot get crazy enough.
All right.
On the Tuesday. You cannot get crazy enough.
No.
Because the more crazy you get on the Tuesday morning, the better you have, the better solution you have Tuesday afternoon.
All right, cool. You know what, Magnus? We've been talking for an hour about this.
Okay,
right?
cool.
And we got some good questions. I want to just add to what you were saying. I always feel a little bit more secure when I facilitate stuff if I tried it out in a secure environment, and if I have a little bit of a toolbox to okay, how do we do this? Well, start with drawing apples or whatnot, those kind of things that I have a little bit of, canvases or whatnot that I can use, right?
Yeah, good point. One thing that you can do as a facilitator is that when you move around, especially on the Tuesday, and look at what people are doing, that you come with suggestions.
Yeah.
And you say, oh, I liked the apples that you're having apples here. That's nice. Can you have more apples? In what way can you have more apples?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And actually, this is something, it's a secret.
It's a secret.
But actually what you can say can be totally random.
But now I recognize you, Magnus.
Exactly.
Okay.
But you emphasize something that they're doing and ask them to do more of that.
Yeah.
This looks good. Can you explore this further?
Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless if you think it's interesting or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's just a way of creating energy.
Okay. Cool.
Because that's the only problem is that we want to get to the right solution as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't.
No, right. And talking about energy, it's 19 o'clock here in Sweden, and you probably want to go and spend some time with your families as well. Right. It's been beautiful to see you, and also a lot of old and new friends actually among you. So it's really nice. We're also gonna actually, as I wrote in the email, we're gonna send out an email with an invitation to our Slack community. So if you want to continue the conversation about design sprints, we're actually going to, be available there.
Sure.
And probably I think that some things could be shared, such as your preferred tools and whatnot. So if you wanna, it's completely optional, of course, but if you want to join us in our Slack community, there's an email coming to you in a few minutes, actually.
Cool.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a lovely evening with you guys, right? Enjoy your dinner and stay safe out there.
Stay safe.
Bye-bye.